Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Today I'm looking at a brand new loco from Dapol. Today's loco was announced so long ago that I can't actually remember it being announced. It's just always been a loco that is on the way at some point in the future from Dapol. Well, finally that status has changed because now the locos have been delivered. And the new engine is this. It is the all-new Class 59 from Dapol. And this is such a departure from the last few new locos we saw from Dapol, that being the Manor Class and the Large Prairie. Because of course this thing is not a quaint old steam locomotive, it's a bang up to date modern diesel. But like those steam locomotives that Dapol produces, this thing still seems to have some great value for money to it. Now, to give some context, I consider some of the best value locos in the industry to be from Acura scale, and their locos range from about 169 to 189. Well, this new loco from Dapol has an RRP of £173.20, and I bought mine from a retailer Hatton's for £147.22. Now, if Dapol have done a good job on this, the same sort of job that they usually do, then that will make this an incredibly good value model. So I'm really excited to see what Dapol have been able to do with this for that kind of money. And I'm also looking forward to finding out whether this loco was worth the seemingly eternal wait. So come and join me, we'll see what this is like. If you'd like to pick one up for yourself, I will be including some affiliate links down in the description for you. For now though, let's get started. So, as usual from Dapol, these are packaged in the high quality solid box with the nice line drawing on the front. Always nice to see that. If I show you the end of the box, you can see the version I have here, and that is 4D-005-002. It is a 00 Class 59, number 59206, and it is in the DB Schenker livery, and the name of it is John F. Yeoman. And the model era is modern, 2018 onwards, so bang up to date really. The minimum recommended radius for the loco is radius 1. Most locos are radius 2. This one can do even tighter. So if you've got a nice little shunting layout where your little 040 steam locos run on super tight curves, guess what? You can run a Class 59 on it. What an honour. And it is DCC ready with a 21 pin DCC socket. And that is pretty much all the box tells us. So I think it's time to get this out and see what Dapol did with the new Class 59. So, as always, I've not had this box open yet, although I did see a sample of this loco running at Worley, but obviously I wasn't able to get a close look, so this will be my first proper look at the 59. Okay, so we've got some sort of instructions here. So most of Dapol's new locos come with a really high quality booklet with some really high production value. Here we've got just instructions printed onto A4 with what looks like a diagram drawn with crayons. So, alright, fair enough, it's a bit different. So, quick start, please check that you have the accessory. Alright, so that just lets us know what's in the accessories bag. Bit about DCC. It says no running in or lubrication is required initially. A little bit there about maintenance. Again, they're just saying a little drop of oil is all you really need after lots and lots of hours. Some info on fitting accessories and removing the body. Apparently the body is just held by 4 clips. Do not loosen or remove any screws. Okay, I'll try not to. Replacement of the body, clips back on, and apparently there are some internal switches for presumably the lights. Let's see if there's any more info on this. Alright, yeah, 2 bits of paper here. I think the other one is the warranty. Okay, yeah, so this is a bit more on the switches, so that's probably useful if you're not on DCC. Fitting DCC, okay, that looks fairly standard. You've got a list of functions. There are some Class 59s that include smoke units. They are a bit more expensive, but that is a feature of the Dapol 59, not mine unfortunately, and a little bit on spare parts. So frankly, I mean, it sort of gives you all you need to know, but I do miss the pages of diagrams and information and all of that good stuff. Yeah, I would say that is not quite up to Dapol's usual standards. And, oh, there's a little bit more here, but again, I think that's just about the warranty. So we haven't got any info about the prototype. And yeah, the instructional material is kept to a minimum, but I suppose it does the job. Right, time to look at the logo then. So let's remove the foam, nice quality foam packaging. And there it is, the 59 in the DB Schenker livery. Nice red livery, okay. Man, I have to say the box felt extremely heavy, and this logo feels even heavier still. I think we might have a contender for the heaviest logo in the fleet here, which sounds extreme, but yeah, it's hard to gauge, but that seems seriously, seriously heavy. Right, let's push this out then, and see what we're dealing with. Oh, not an expensive model, this. I mean, seriously, Accurascale stuff is relatively inexpensive compared to others. This thing's even cheaper. Right, so we've got an accessories bag. First of all, I can see we do have what looks like a separately fitted nameplate here. Whether this is etched or not, I'm not sure. I think it probably is, but it's not sort of a high shine one or anything. But still, that is a quality feature, isn't it? We've got some buffer beam parts, including some screw link couplings. I'm not sure if they are the articulating moving type. Maybe they're just molded fixed in place. Yeah, I think they are. So yeah, some of the features on this loco seem to date back a way. I'm not sure, it's only just come out, but maybe this has been in the pipeline for so long that they didn't get a chance to add the super high quality couplings or the modern instructions that have been coming with Dapol's latest stuff. I don't know, it's like it's been taken from a few years ago and brought out in 2023. But yeah, we'll see. We'll have a look at the loco. That's the only thing that really matters. So let's pull this out. Great quality packaging, I have to say. You've got all the foam protecting the model in its clamshell. Okay. And again, we've got some plastic protecting the loco itself and obscuring it for the time being. But there it is. All right. So we've got some detail on the roof straight away. I can see a nice etched grille here, separately fitted exhaust system. Right, let's pull this out. Core. Yeah, it's heavy, folks. Man, is it heavy. Okay, here it is. The brand new Dapol Class 59. And it looks odd. There's something odd with the bogies here. Do I just take these off? Yes. Okay. Thank goodness they are not part of the bogies. Alright, so I guess that holds the loco in a safer way in transit, but those come off quite easily. Alright, that's more like it. Yes, that looks more like a Class 59 to me. So, noticeably the livery looks to be a quality one, although it doesn't have that same quality finish that we've seen from the likes of Bachmann and Accurascale. Those have been more on the side of glossy, I would say. This is not completely matte. I would still describe it as satin, but it's certainly closer to the matte end than it is the gloss. And yeah, it doesn't look quite as quality as a result of that, but the level of detail at a glance certainly seems okay, doesn't it? There's quite a bit going on here. So we'll take a much closer look at the detail in just a second. I'll also get this on the scales and let you know what it weighs. But first up, here's a bit more information on the Class 59s in real life. The Class 59 was a diesel-electric locomotive introduced to Great Britain in 1985. 15 of these were built in total for Foster Yeoman, ARC Southern and National Power. The locomotives from each operator received a separate subclass of 59/0, 59/1 and 59/2 respectively. They were notable as being the first British mainline diesel locomotives to be privately owned, and they were also the first British mainline diesel locos to be built in the United States. The specification for the class was for maximum reliability, to have a downtime of no more than 5%. In practice, the class actually exceeded this target with 99.8% availability, which is a real testament to their reliability. From 1998, the class was superseded by an even more modern and up-to-date diesel known as the Class 66. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And the 66, of course, looks extremely similar to the Class 59, but they were far more numerous, with over 650 of those going into service. That said, the 59 still exists and is in use today, and can still be seen in use on the network. So there it is, up close and personal for you, the all-new Dapol Class 59. And I am pretty impressed by this, actually. Its quality is high, I would say. The level of detail is also high. And in this day and age, to deliver a model like this for less than £150 at the retailers, I think is really, really impressive. However, you can tell that this model was not manufactured by, let's say, a Curascale. Yes, I think this is a little bit cheaper than their Deltic and the Class 92 for a reason. It's not like they've magically been able to produce a model of that kind of standard for less money. And some of the ways that you can notice this are fairly obvious. Some of the other ways are a little bit harder to describe, but in general I would just say that the resolution and perhaps the definition of the model just seems to be a couple of notches lower than, let's say, the Curascale Class 92. If we look at the underframe area of the 59, for instance, you can see there's a lot of detail here. It looks good, it's perfectly adequate. But then if we substitute in the Curascale Class 92, to me it just seems like there's more to see here. There is more detail and definition. Now again, that might be in my head, that might be not Dapol's fault. It could just be that the prototype of the 59 is a little bit more visually simplistic in that area. But that's the way I would describe the model in general. The livery, again, is absolutely fine. To the modeler on a budget, I think this is perfectly adequate. But again, it doesn't quite have that quality sheen that we have seen on some of these other new locos. I keep mentioning a Curascale because that's the one that's in my head. That's the last loco of this sort of era that I reviewed. And I think Dapol are quite unlucky to have released this just after a loco like the 92, because obviously the standard of the 92 was so incredibly high that almost anything else isn't going to look as great by comparison. And the same thing goes with the sort of cab detail. Yeah, there's not a huge amount of cab detail here. There's a bit of moulded detail, very little of it picked out. We haven't got masses of print work on the back wall, for instance. Again, I think this is fine. To a modeler on a budget, you're grateful to be able to afford something like this in the first place, and you're happy to make a couple of concessions like this, but the slightly lesser level of detail is noticeable here. The quality is all right though. I mean, the build quality is pretty good. The amount of glue visible is kept to a minimum, I would say. A few of the front facing lights look a little bit dodgy. I don't know what's happened here, but one of those headlights is inset a little bit. And some of these separately fitted grills on the ends are really quite messily glued in place. Both of them really look a little bit on the wonk, and there is visible glue around them. But that's really being picky because the detail on the rest of the model looks absolutely fine. And in terms of weight, it's very, very heavy, 675 grams. It's not the heaviest loco in the collection, but it wasn't far off. It's in 4th place, just 10 grams lower than the Curascale Class 92. So the weight is absolutely fantastic. Bearing all of this in mind, that's not to say this loco doesn't have some impressive features. I think it really does. For instance, you can see these axle boxes are separately fitted and they are going to rotate as the loco runs, so that's awesome. And you've got little bits that I don't even understand why they've included, like these cab doors that just open slightly. That's as far as they go, but it's just cool, isn't it? I just put my finger on that door when I was inspecting the loco and it opened. And it just gives you that one moment of surprise where you think, wow, this is a real little locomotive right here in my hands. So yeah, the model is impressive in that sense. Let's take a closer look at some of this stuff then. So although the finish of the livery may not be to the highest standard, the application certainly is. The DB Schenker logo and lettering looks absolutely fine, even though it's printed onto that sort of corrugated metal texture. The joins between the grey and the red are more or less perfect. You've got the nice sort of orange lining on there as well. I guess the join is not quite as pristine as some towards the ends on the roof, but again, it's really not bad. You've got the running numbers below the cabs. Again, all of the print work is fine. And then you've got the nameplate on the opposite end. Again, bear in mind we have a separate etched version of this, but even the one printed on the loco looks awesome. It looks fine, no problem. You've got the warning signs printed on, quite a bit of detail on the underframe, which catches the eye quite nicely. You've got the separately fitted ladders and steps, which are actually part of the bogie, and the bogies themselves even have a touch of decoration on them, which is quite impressive. Similarly, the ends are nicely painted as well, so really when you start looking up close, the livery is fairly complex. Overall, the detail is good. The underframe is decent. You've got these tanks as well as quite a lot of other moulded detail. just below the main body, you've got all of this wiring and pipework, and the detailing here is achieved by a mixture of just moulding and separately fitted parts. So you get some of this wiring standing out because it's separately fitted, but then the bulk of the detail comes from just the moulding, I guess, on the chassis. Yeah, the effect there is really quite impressive, and again, on a relatively budget model, this is nice to see. I think some of these grills might be separately fitted, but they're not etched or anything like that as far as I can tell. But again, the quality of the moulding there is absolutely fine. The doors have separately fitted grab rails either side, and they have a nice bit of relief as a result. On the ends, you've got the back end, which has the sort of valance with the hole in it and the NEM tension lock coupling poking through. That's got a really, really nice kinematic action to it. Very, very smooth. Does seem to be drooping downwards a little bit though, so I've got a few concerns about whether that's actually going to couple correctly, but hopefully it will. And then the front end, you've got a valance without the hole in it, so it looks a bit more realistic. And of course, in the accessories bag, you have the option to fit a coupling there too if you want to, but that's not how it comes from the factory. And then the buffer beams themselves have a little bit of detail on them from the factory. Again, depending on how you're planning to use the locomotive, you have more detail to add to these areas if you want to. But of course, you do have the buffers, which are sprung. I think these are just plastic buffers, but they feel like they're quality, and obviously there's no flashing on them or anything. So visually, they are absolutely fine. You've also got some separately fitted wipers on the windows, which are fully glazed, and the glazing looks quality, actually. It's very, very fine looking. Not too thick, it doesn't distort your vision as you look through the windows. Quite good and realistic, actually. I would say possibly that is better than the Accurascale's effort on the 92. And then up on top, as I said earlier on, you've got this etched grille, which is neatly fitted, actually. Yep, nothing wrong at all with that. And then you've got the exhaust system on the other side, which again is just a plastic piece, although I think it's separately fitted. And presumably on the relevant versions of this model, there will be some sort of smoke generator under here, which produces the exhaust fumes. And I would love to see it. I kind of regret not getting one of those. But again, if you want to invest in a slightly more expensive version of the model, that is a feature that Dapol have on offer. And there are a couple of separately fitted parts up on the roof, but most of it up here is just part of the moulding. And then finally, the bogie detail looks fine. There's good relief on quite a few of the parts and quite a bit of moulded detail too. The one thing I would say is that the pickups on the wheels have not been blackened in any way. They are still copper coloured and they do catch the light quite a bit. They're quite visible from the outside of the loco, which is not something I noticed with the Class 92 or really a lot of other locos. Not a big deal, and if it bothered you, I suppose you could disassemble the bogie, depending on how convenient that is, and you could blacken those pickups that are visible if you wanted. But again, that's only a small criticism. So overall, I think for the money, this loco is absolutely tremendous. Again, they've not been able to magically produce an incredible top-of-the-line loco for much less money than the likes of Bachmann and Accurascale. No, I think the slightly lower price of this loco is reflected in the loco itself. Incidentally, I think Dapol have been able to achieve that miracle in the past with, let's say, the Manor class. That was really inexpensive, and yet that was rivaling even the top manufacturers in the industry. This one, not so much, but it's still a great loco. The level of detail is still good, and I have to tip my hat and say well done to Dapol for bringing a slightly less expensive model to the market, and yet still doing a really, really good job on it. So with that, let's take it down onto the track. We'll see how it runs, see what sort of mechanism this has got. I suspect it's going to be quite a good one, actually, but we'll find out. And let's have some fun with this thing. All right, here we go. So there you have it, the all-new Class 59 by Dapol down onto the track. And the initial performance tests have already been filmed, and I'll show you how that went in just a second. Now though, I want to talk about the mechanism. Now, overall, I would say that this is not quite up to Dapol's usual high standards, but equally there are no major complaints here either. First of all, there is a lack of screws where both the base keepers and the body are concerned. The base keeper is just clipped on, and it's not as awkward to overcome these clips as it is on some other locos, but still I do prefer the screws. Oddly, the wheels came off with the base keeper plate this time, and the reason for that is that the rotating axle boxes actually keep them there. Now, I don't think there are any proper bearings where those axle boxes are. I'm pretty sure the axle boxes just ride on the bogie detailing piece. There are no bearings on the plastic bogie chassis either. It's not entirely clear whether the axles ride on that bogie chassis or where the rotating axle boxes are. I would guess probably the chassis, but either way, my tests show that locos do run more freely with bearings, and it's a shame that this loco doesn't have them. Dapol usually do fit that, so I'm guessing the added complication of those rotating axle boxes has meant that the bearings were not fitted this time, particularly as when you're replacing the bogie base keeper plate with the axles in it, it would be very tricky indeed to line up the bearings as well as getting the pickups into position. The pickups themselves are really decent. They've gone Acura scale style with these dual pickup contacts on 2/3 of the wheels, so you're going to get some good reliability there on the track. Now, the body removal is not too bad. It is 4 clips to overcome as the instructions mentioned, but the instructions failed to mention the valancers are not actually part of the chassis, and so if you take the body off with those still fitted, the coupling will kind of tear it off, and I did kind of have mine tear off. I don't know if it's broken or not. I was able to put it back on, but again, it's a shame that Dapol cheaped out on the instructions, because those fully produced booklets that they usually make are some of the best in the industry, and this time we just got a sheet of A4 that missed out important information like that. Anyway, underneath the body, you've got a heavy die-cast chassis with no wires connecting it to the body because there are spring-loaded contacts here for the cab lights. There's also this housing for the smoke unit. Because this is not a smoke-fitted version, I'm pretty sure that enclosure is completely empty, but you can imagine the smoke unit going in there on the smoke-fitted versions. I can't see any speakers. Unless there's a speaker underneath that smoke unit, I don't think there is a pre-fitted speaker on this loco. The instructions certainly didn't mention it. The loco also has front and back LEDs, as you can see, and they are directional, and you'll see how those work in just a moment. You've got the 21-pin DCC decoder socket, which has a blanking plate fitted to it at the moment, and there's also an onboard logic chip which controls the lights, because apparently there are more functions on this loco than there are functions supported by the decoders, so the onboard logic makes sure that all the lighting works as it should. These are the switches mentioned on the instructions if you need to use those to change the lighting settings. And then finally, there is this absolutely enormous motor. It just boggles the mind how enormous this thing is, with 2 huge flywheels fitted to it as well. Yeah, this thing is absolutely ginormous. I can't remember seeing a loco with such a large motor and flywheels before. It's quite amazing. And then in terms of the gauge, it's quite loose this time at 14.2mm back to back. So there you go. I mean, the mechanism's got most of the features you would look for. It's a pity it's not more accessible. It's a pity it doesn't have the bearings. But apart from that, for the money, again, I think you definitely get what you pay for. So with that, let's move on and I'll show you how the performance test went. Right, I think we're ready to give this a go then. Now, of course, in Dapol's instructions, they did say that no special running in was required. And in fact, they always say that. But in my experience, it is Dapol's locos in particular that usually need a lot of running in. And so I am still going to let this loco run in before I draw any conclusions, even though, according to Dapol, really, it ought to be at its best right out of the box. But does it work? Let's find out. Let's set the direction to forwards and see. I'm going to ease it up. Yeah, it works. I've noticed the lights coming on. I'll show you that in just a moment. We do have the axle boxes rotating, which is really nice. What an awesome feature is that. I think this is the 3rd loco. Yeah, 3rd loco I've had that has that feature, and it seems to work very nicely. Yep. No problem at all with the rotating axle boxes. It seems nice and smooth and quite slow actually. That's 50% speed. Let's run by again. That's 50. But I guess it makes sense, you know, they're freight locos. They are supposed to be slower, I suppose, so that's good. I wonder what the top speed looks like. Let's try that. Yeah. It's got some grunt to it. Okay. Cut the power. It's got some flywheel action. It certainly doesn't stop dead. So, yep, we've got some flywheels in there, clearly. Let me show you the actual lights then. So we've got cool white LEDs which come on in the forwards direction, and then as you'd expect the tail lights are the red ones, and then inside the cab, regardless of the direction, you've got lights coming on inside. So yeah, we have got interior cab lighting, which is absolutely awesome. Alright, let's see if there's some torque in this mechanism then, because a few of the Dapol steamers do seem to suffer in this department. So let's do what I usually do, put my fingers in front of the buffers, turn it up to 50. Yeah, so it's seriously slowed down, but it has overcome my finger there, which is an odd phrase, isn't it? Okay, so we'll see how it gets on after running in that department. It might be a little more torquey later on, but straight out of the box, let's just try the crawl. So I've got that on record. I'm going to ease it up very, very slowly. I think it might be quite good, but we'll see. No, it's kind of struggling to crawl actually. Shows what I know. Yeah, that seems to be about the slowest I can get it to sustain. Alright, let's try it in reverse. Ooh, yeah, it sort of just lurches into life. It is quite hard to control down here at this end. Bear in mind I'm on analog here. Your mileage may vary on DCC, but yeah, give it a bit more. Yeah, then it sort of takes off reasonably smoothly, I suppose, at that low speed. It's definitely not a bad crawl. That's slowed down now. Struggling. Let's give it some more. So yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest ever. It is a heavy loco, as always, and that is a challenge to any mechanism at the crawl speeds. But it still hasn't been running yet, so we will have to see if that's any better later on. In terms of reliability, though, it's not cutting out or anything. It may sort of stall due to the slow speed I'm asking it to do, but at no point has it actually cut out and needed a nudge, so continuity-wise, it seems very good. Alright, well, it's supposed to be able to handle first radius curves, so the second on my layout should be child's play to this loco. So let's go forwards, and let's go 50%, let's see how it gets on. Alright, here it goes. Yeah, it's certainly a slow one, isn't it? Now, is it going to slow down? Curves? No, I think it maintained a fairly constant speed there, which is good, and up it goes, up the slight gradient. Yeah, so that suggests it's not slow because of a lack of torque or a weak motor. It's slow because that's the way it's designed. And I think from a prototypical standpoint that makes sense. So all in all, yeah, the performance seems really good. It's obviously staying on the track. The speed is very consistent and constant, no slowing down. And the torque seems to be okay. So actually it's shaping up pretty well. It may speed up as it runs in. I think that's still possible. We'll see if that's true in just a moment. But for now, I think I'm going to let it run. We'll give it 30 forwards, 30 backwards. I'll give it exactly the same as I give every other loco, even though they said this one doesn't need it. And then we'll come back and see whether there is any difference. But yeah, the performance is very much the same as the level of detail. We've seen slightly better, but I think for the money, it's absolutely adequate. Yeah, a fine performer. Okay folks, I am back, and performance went without issue. I would say the speed is pretty much unchanged, having run in the loco. Yeah, it does seem to be slow and controlled, but it wasn't cutting out, never really slowed down that I noticed around any curves. Seems to be as consistent as it was when I first tried it, so yeah, that's fine. And just to show you now how it is, I'll run it past at 50% for you. Yeah, I would say that's largely the same. It's nice and smooth, nice and quiet, no problem at all with that. The torque, I think we need to test to see if that's gotten any better. So let's set this to forward, go up to 50. Yeah, I mean, it is struggling quite a lot under my fingers there. It does speed up much more after I relinquish its influence. So the torque's not amazing, but it's not so bad that it affects the loco over curves and such, at least not running light. We'll see how it gets on with rolling stock later on. How is the crawl though? Let's see how that is now. Just going to ease it up. Slight jerk there. And then it kind of takes off. So there's no point where it's sort of particularly coggy and jerky. It just doesn't really take off until the higher speeds. So again, we have seen locos that crawl better than this. Again, that's about the slowest it can go. Practically speaking, do you need your Class 59s to go much slower than this? No, I don't think so. So the difference this makes is probably negligible. But yeah, I will go out there and say we have seen better crawlers than that, but not by an awful lot. Okay, well, the pulling power is great. 1 Newton, thanks to its weight of 675 grams. That should be enough for this loco to haul around 55 coaches, which again, I think is way more than you need. So to test the pulling power today, I've set up this train of mixed freight, all sorts of stuff on here, including the Foster Yeoman JHA hoppers. And those of you looking to buy a Class 59 to haul that should be rubbing your hands by now, because obviously you've got the heavy, heavy loco that you need to haul those heavy, heavy hoppers. So that's great. Right, let's go and couple up to the train, see how this goes. So the couplings on this Silver Bullet tanker are not good. They don't phase forward or anything, so this might not be a truly fair test of the Class 59. Let me see if I can straighten it to touch. But we'll see how it goes. Like I say, the 59 seems fine. It's a nice, smooth kinematic motion, except for the fact that it does seem to droop down a little bit. But no, it actually seems okay, doesn't it? So maybe they accounted for their droop in the design. But I don't know, it coupled to that Silver Bullet quite well, and that's quite a harsh test. So actually, that's not bad at all. Okay, here we go. And again, the torque might not be the greatest in the world, but it's hauling this reasonably heavy train very, very easily. So that's good as well. So in the sidings, I've got some other Dapol diesels for you to spot. There is an odd one out, so let me know if you figure out which one that is. On the middle line though, I've got another Class 59, the other one that I own. And this is the Lima one. I'm not sure if Hornby did a version of this 59 based on the Lima tools. I suppose they could do, and no doubt they will now that Dapol have brought out theirs. But I was thinking about this. I mean, you know, even if they did, I don't think they would be able to beat Dapol on value for money, because what? The Hornby Railroad diesels cost about 100 quid, give or take. Well, the Dapol one is less than 50 quid more. And as far as I'm concerned, you get way more than 50 quid's worth of extra features. So I don't think Hornby would have much to gain by bringing out a Railroad 59. Not really. And then on the inside line, we have, of course, the loco that kind of updated and replaced the Class 59. Or rather, well, I guess superseded it. It is the Class 66 with some vans. So let's go and catch up on the Dapol 59, see how she gets on with a load. So this really is a very, very slow and steady loco, isn't it? Which is fine, but it's not what I was expecting, because the sample I saw at Worley was really whizzing round, I'm pretty sure. This one doesn't do that, and I think it is actually better for it. Obviously at the high speed it has got that extra speed if that's what you want, but at 50% at middle of the road it seems to run very nice and realistically. And as you will have just seen, even with a load, it's not slowing down as it does so. So actually, I'm pretty impressed by this performance. We've seen better torque, that's for sure, but it has enough torque to haul a decent length train with a good bit of weight on it without slowing down on analog. And as I've been saying quite a lot recently, for a very, very heavy loco that weighs a lot and it's got such a beefy motor with massive flywheels, to say it shows no sign of any struggling at all, up a slight gradient on curves with all that load, on a non-feedback analog controller, it's impressive, it's fine. It really is fit for purpose, isn't it? So actually I really like this thing. Yeah, it's pretty much the full package. The detail's good, the quality's okay, and so is the performance. When you consider the price, this loco is quite unprecedented really, in terms of what it offers for the money. And I find myself saying this quite often of Dapol locos, so to see them keeping up this trend is really, really encouraging to see. So well done Dapol, what a lovely, lovely piece of work. Here come my ratings then for Dapol's brand new Class 59. The level of detail for me is a good solid 4-star. There's a lot of detail here, lots of separately fitted parts, some nice etched grills, the rotating axle boxes are really impressive, you've got the sprung buffers, opening doors, and a good degree of decoration too. The things that let it down I would say would be the finish. I think we have seen better finishes on other locos from different manufacturers, and also the cab detail, again a little bit lacking. Not a big deal for a loco at this price, but again this is strictly comparative. The performance similarly is really good. I've given it again a solid 4-star. It's nice and smooth, the speed is very sensible, and it runs at a very consistent speed. The torque though is not fantastic. It's not terrible, it doesn't stall if you put too much of a load on it, but it does slow down quite dramatically. Not on curves though, I should say, and also the crawl isn't the best either. I suspect that's possibly due to the size of the motor and the flywheels. They are going to be really quite hard to turn at low speed, but again we do see other locos that have a better crawl. The pulling power though at 55 coaches or 1 Newton of tractive effort is absolutely fantastic. That is as much as you could possibly want, plus a little bit more. The mechanism is 3.5. It does have some good features, like I say, massive chunky 5-pole motor, really good quality. It's got the full lighting package. However, it does not have the proper bearings on the axles. I think that's due to the added complication of the rotating axle boxes, although that's just my guess. And it's also not that serviceable either, relying on clips rather than screws to hold the most important parts of the loco together. Yeah, it's not up to Dapol's usual standards in terms of mechanism, but it's not bad either. It does have all of the basics. The quality for me is a 3-star, kind of middle of the road. Obviously I like the weight, the die-cast chassis brings a lot of that and that's great. The livery, the quality of the decoration, all of that is fine. The general build quality is pretty good as well. Most of the components are fitted nice and straight without too much visible glue. However, those grills on either end of the loco are not fitted well. That sort of let the loco down when I spotted that. And I also noticed on some of the close-ups that a couple of components had little paint spatters on them, and also some of the buffer beam parts had some of the paint cracking and coming off them as well. So I've knocked off a little bit for that. It's a solid 3-star. The quality is definitely not bad, but I think we have seen better, and even better from Dapol themselves. The value for money though, you can't argue with. £173.20 is the DCC Ready RRP, and I paid £147.22 for this from Hatton's. And I think the model very much matches the price. It isn't super expensive and therefore the model isn't super high spec. However, for the money you get a highly detailed loco that runs well and is put together nicely. Overall, I think it's a pretty good deal. So all things considered, that is a score of 8.12 out of 10, or a grade of B. Yeah, it's a pretty decent loco, particularly if you're on a budget. Let's put that into the logbook then, and it is in 2nd place above the Haulage ES1 and below the Accurascale 92. Well folks, that will just about do it for my review of the all-new Class 59 from Dapol. And overall, it's great, isn't it? It's a nice piece of kit. I think we have seen locos with more detail, we've seen locos with better mechanisms and better performance, but we haven't seen too many locos of this kind of standard below £150, at least not for a really long time. So I think that's what this loco shines at. It's not particularly outstanding in any area, but it is decent, it is modern, it is up to date, and it's also affordable, most importantly of all. So for that, I can totally recommend it, sure. It's not going to blow you away. I think you'll stick to Accurascale and maybe Bachmann for that sort of thing. But for what it is and for the money, it's a very good purchase indeed. So let me know what you think about this. Have you got a Dapol Class 59? What do you think about it? If you've got a different livery, let me know what it's like. Of course, there is a lot to choose from in terms of livery. There's a good handful out right now, and Dapol have only just recently announced a load more liveries as well. So good level of choice too in terms of livery. All right, thank you very much folks for watching. Affiliate links in the description if you'd like to pick one up, and I'll see you again very soon. All right, cheers folks, take care.